Mr. Chairman, when I was young, we went to the foot of Champlain Street and swam in Bay Como, for which my hometown was named. Today there's a park where we used to swim. It's called Le Parc des Pionniers. The effluents from the paper mill created landfill where once there had been only pristine waters. Nobody swims in the bay anymore. And that's where my awareness of the environment and of environmental degradation began. We've seen too many such sites in this country, including company towns carved out of the wilderness, with little regard for the impact on their surroundings. In fairness, it should be noted that in those days, few of us knew any better. But now, we do. We need to learn those lessons of careless development and of neglecting to clean up after ourselves. We need to learn it, especially in the North. The future of this country is going north, and it's time for a new northern vision, one of sustainable development that preserves the Arctic wilderness, protects wildlife, and sustains a way of life for our indigenous peoples. In Bay Como, during one of our campaigns, I once said that my father, as many of you probably said in your hometowns, my father dreamed of a better life for his family, and I dream of a better life for my country. Part of that dream was about leaving a more prosperous and united country to our children, but a large part of it was also about leaving our munificent country environmentally whole. This award by a group of environment leaders as Canada's greenest Prime Minister in history is deeply gratifying. I thank the panel and accept not only on my own behalf, but on behalf of all who served in our government between 1984 and 1993, and as well as those across the aisle in the NDP and the Liberals, who criticized but who collaborated in trying to build better policies for a better Canada. As Elizabeth has mentioned, we established 8 new national parks, including South Moresby, and under the Green Plan put Canada on a path to create 5 more by '96 and another 13 by 2000, completing the national park system begun by Sir John A. Macdonald in 1885 and for whom Sheila Copps voted, quite properly, as the greenest Prime Minister in her judgment in Canada. We began the long overdue cleanup of the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence and Fraser Rivers, and we launched an Arctic strategy seeking to protect our greatest and most fragile wilderness area, the North. And we created the National Roundtable on the Environment and the Economy, recognizing that sustainable development requires the participation and leadership of the private sector. The most compelling environmental challenge facing the world today is global warming. In Toronto in 1988, we hosted the first international scientific conference on climate change. The scientists gathered there told us in clear, unambiguous language the nature of the challenge we were facing. In their consensus statement, they concluded, humanity is conducting an unintended, uncontrolled, globally pervasive experiment whose ultimate consequences are second only to global nuclear war, unquote. If global warming is not arrested, climate change may be irreversible. In the fall of 2005, we witnessed the perfect storms of global warming. The hurricanes that slammed the Gulf course incubated in the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. The trends are clear. More Category 4 and 5 hurricanes, higher storm surges, serious loss of forests to pine beetles as in British Columbia, earlier springs, hotter summers, and warmer winters. In the Arctic, we are witnessing the shrinking of the polar ice cap. The polar bear, a very symbol of the Canadian North, may soon be an endangered species. It stands to reason that if the ice is melting, it has got nowhere to go and no ability to feed itself. From my own experience, I would offer 2 observations on addressing environmental issues. First, it doesn't really matter what the process is, so long as the problem is addressed by firm national leadership. Where political will prevails, solutions will follow. And And second, there are few durable solutions on the environment or on any other international issue without the engagement of the United States and the leadership of its president. So whether the process proves to be Kyoto or something else, let's acknowledge the urgency of global warming, and then let's work together to get the United States of America to the table. It isn't by lecturing the Americans on their record on emissions reduction that we'll succeed, especially when our own record is nearly twice as bad as theirs. In 1990, our government committed Canada to keeping greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels. In spite of signing the Kyoto Accord, which commits us to reducing emissions to 6% below 1990 levels, Canada's emissions have increased by 24%, as opposed to a 13% increase in the United States. Simply put, we are in no position to be moralizing with the United States or anyone else. We simply don't have the high ground. Kyoto alone is no panacea. China and India are two awakening industrial giants. And what's happening in those two countries containing approximately 1/3 of the world's entire population? A leading journal recently reported that India's greenhouse gas emissions could rise 70% in 20 years. The increase in China's emissions in the next 25 years will nearly equal the increase from the rest of the entire industrialized world. China's total electricity demand will rise an estimated 2,600 gigawatts by 2050, which is the equivalent of adding 4 300-megawatt power plants every week for the next 45 years. Or to put it in another way, in order to satisfy its requirements, China requires the urgent construction of 1.5 new Hydro-Quebecs every year. And with 37,000 megawatts, Hydro-Quebec is by far the largest such producer of electricity in North America. And finally, India's energy consumption rose 208% from 80 to 2001, even faster than China's, and nearly half the Indian population still lacks regular access to electricity. While China and India are both parties to Kyoto, neither was asked to take on targets in the first commitment period from 2008 to 12. How they will engage in the post-2012 regime and whether they will take on binding targets is a huge and a pressing challenge. And so, whether in the Kyoto framework or by some other means, Canada nevertheless must begin urgently reducing its own GHG emissions.